Picture this. You're sitting on the couch, beer in hand, watching the Socceroos walk out at the 2026 World Cup. The crowd is roaring. Your mates are messaging you in the group chat. And then it hits you. You could actually be there, not watching it on a screen at 4 in the morning, but standing in the stadium, singing along, living the moment as it happens. Then the second thought arrives, and it's the one that stops most Aussies dead in their tracks. How much is this going to cost? So today, every single dollar gets broken down properly. Every expense it takes to fly an Aussie from Sydney or Melbourne to the 2026 World Cup, follow the Socceroos through the group stage and come home without wrecking your finances. Let's get into it. Flights are where most Aussies get their first reality check. The 2026 World Cup is being hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, with 11 cities in the US, 3 in Mexico, and 2 in Canada. The Socceroos landed in Group D, with the 3 group stage matches scheduled in Vancouver against Turkey on June the 14th, Seattle against the USA on June the 20th, and Santa Clara just outside San Francisco against Paraguay on June the 26th. A return flight from Sydney or Melbourne to the US or Canadian West Coast in June 2026 is currently sitting between 2,200 and 3,500 Australian dollars in economy. Premium economy runs $4,500 to $6,500. Business class sits north of $9,000, which is a whole other conversation. For a realistic budget, lock in $2,800 for return economy. That's your starting point, pretty much non-negotiable, unless you fancy swimming the Pacific. Frequent flyer points are where serious savings live for anyone who's been collecting them. Points balances built up through everyday spending on a Qantas or Velocity credit card across the past few years can wipe out the single biggest line item of the trip. But once you're in North America, you're not staying in one city. The Socceroos play across 3 different cities and 2 countries, which means internal flights become unavoidable. Domestic flights inside the US and Canada during the tournament are expected to surge by 40 to 60%. A flight from Vancouver down to Seattle, then across to Santa Clara, that normally costs $200 per leg, will probably hit $400 to $500 during the World Cup window. Following the team through all 3 group stage matches means budgeting around 1,200 Australian dollars just for internal travel. So already, before a single match ticket has been bought, you're sitting around $4,000 in. The tickets themselves are where FIFA has gone absolutely mental. Official ticket prices for the 2026 World Cup have jumped dramatically compared to Qatar in 2022. Back then, a group stage ticket could be picked up for around $55. For 2026, the cheapest Category 4 group stage tickets started around $60. But the moment a decent seat enters the picture, prices explode. Category 1 group stage tickets range from $450 to $990. When Australia plays the United States as the host nation in Seattle, Category 1 tickets are sitting at $1,050. That works out to roughly 1,600 Australian dollars for one match. 3 group stage matches in decent seats lands realistically between 2,400 and 3,500 Australian dollars in tickets alone. And that's assuming FIFA's dynamic pricing model doesn't catch you out, which adjusts ticket prices based on real-time demand, similar to how Uber surge pricing works. The final ticket, for context, has already pushed past $10,000. So unless you're prepared to sell a kidney, the final is probably off the table. Paying for tickets in US dollars on an Australian credit card also triggers a foreign transaction fee of around 3% on most cards, which adds another $90 to $100 on top of a $3,000 ticket spend. Accommodation is where the wheels really come off the budget. Hotels in host cities have absolutely skyrocketed. Average nightly rates across the 16 host cities are sitting at around $499 per night, with some cities reporting hotel prices up 300% compared to normal rates. For the Vancouver, Seattle, and Santa Clara stretch the Socceroos are playing, expect to pay between $250 and $400 Australian dollars a night, even outside the city centres. Across the 12-day group stage window, even at a modest $300 Australian dollars per night, that lands you at around $3,600 in accommodation alone. Airbnb is telling the same story. Local hosts have worked out exactly what tourists will pay, and they're charging accordingly. There are ways to bring this down though. hostels, shared rooms with other Aussie fans through Socceroos supporter groups, or staying 30 minutes outside the city centre can cut accommodation costs almost in half. Then there's the boring stuff that nobody factors in but absolutely wrecks travel budgets. Your ESTA, which is the US travel authorization Aussies need before flying in, costs $40 and 27 cents and takes a few minutes online. Because the opening match is in Vancouver, a Canadian ETA is also required, which costs 7 Canadian dollars. Travel insurance for 2 weeks across North America is absolutely critical because American medical costs will financially end you if something goes wrong. A decent policy runs 150 to 250 Australian dollars. Without insurance, one bad day at the stadium turns a $13,600 trip into a $50,000 disaster, and US hospitals will pursue international debt through collection agencies that operate inside Australia. Food and drinks in major cities like Seattle, Vancouver, and San Francisco will cost 100 to 150 Australian dollars a day if you're being sensible about it. Over 12 days, that's another $1,500 minimum, and that's before splashing out on game day meals near the stadium, where a basic burger and beer can easily hit $50. Ubers, public transport, the occasional taxi to the stadium, a Socceroos jersey, scarves, and the few beers shared with strangers who become best mates for 90 minutes. All of it adds up to another $1,000 to $1,500 without much effort. One expense most Aussies forget is tipping. In the US, tipping 18 to 20% on restaurant bills is standard, and 15 to 20% on taxis and rideshares. Canada works the same way, with 15 to 18% the norm. Time for the maths. Return international flight, $2,800. Internal North American flights, $1,200. 3 match tickets in decent seats, around $3,000. Accommodation for 12 nights, $3,600. ESTA, Canadian ETA and travel insurance, around $320. Food and daily expenses, $1,500. Local transport, merchandise and the extras you can't predict, $1,200. The total cost for one Australian to follow the Socceroos through the group stage of the 2026 World Cup lands at approximately 13,600 Australian dollars. That's the realistic mid-range figure. Going full budget with shared rooms, economy on every leg, and food trucks instead of restaurants might bring it down to around $9,000. Going premium with better seats and nicer hotels easily pushes it past $25,000. There's also the cost most Aussies don't plan for, which is what happens if the Socceroos actually progress to the knockout stage. The round of 16 runs from June the 28th, and matches are spread across host cities that could mean flying to Dallas, Atlanta, or Kansas City. Extending the trip by another week to follow a knockout run adds roughly $3,500 on top of the $13,600 figure, covering extra accommodation, internal flights, and knockout stage tickets, which jump to $575 to $1,460 per seat. Now, for everyone watching this tournament from the lounge room, the next World Cup is in 2030, co-hosted by Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. That's a 4-year runway to fund the trip properly. At $13,600 total, that breaks down to around $65 a week into a high-interest savings account. The simplest way to make that stick is to open a separate account, label it for the trip so it's not mixed in with everyday spending, and set up an automatic transfer for the same day your pay lands. With current rates between 5 and 5.5% on most Australian high-interest accounts, the money also earns around $1,500 in interest across the 4 years sitting there. By 2030, the trip is fully funded. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.